I like to think of SIEM as kind of like an air traffic control tower where every plane is sending information to it, but the controller in that tower is watching for collisions. And if there's something that's about to happen, something bad about to happen, he's going to alert everybody to it.
Welcome back to the Security Sandbox. I'm Chris, and as always, I'm here with Phil. Tonight, we're talking about something that sits at the center of a lot of security operations, the SIEM. Organizations generate an enormous amount of security telemetry, but collecting those logs is not the same thing as having visibility, and visibility is not necessarily the same thing as security. So what does a SIEM actually do? What separates a useful SIEM from an expensive log repository? This one's right up Phil's wheelhouse. Phil, start us at the beginning. What exactly is a SIEM?
So a SIEM stands for Security Information and Event Management. And what that does is it helps simplify your logging in your environment. Yeah? No? Horrible dad joke? All right.
Good one.
Moving on. So what the tool does, again, Security Information and Event Management, it basically takes all of your different logs, so your Windows events from your endpoints and your endpoint detection tool and your firewall logs, and it pulls them into this platform, and it acts as kind of a single pane of glass to kind of, aid in investigations. And, when you're pulling in all of these logs, you can do different things with it that we'll dive into later on in the show. Very high level, you can create alerts off of these logs. You can create dashboards for things that you want to see. If you have a SOAR tool, you can have SIEM and SOAR run in tandem to kind of automate some workflows. If a specific detection fires, then X workflow does this. I like to think of SIEM as kind of like an air traffic control tower where every plane is sending information to it, but the controller in that tower is watching for collisions. And if there's something that's about to happen, something bad about to happen, he's going to alert everybody to it.
That's a really good analogy. So basically you're saying there are lots of systems out there. They all generate logs, but what happens to a company if maybe they don't capture those logs or ingest them into a SIEM product like you're talking?
Yeah, it's really important. Logs really matter in an organization, specifically from an information security standpoint. Why do I say that? You risk, if you're not bringing in all of your important logs, you risk missing something. If you're not bringing in your firewall logs, you miss potential traffic that is, alerting within that firewall console, but it might not be alerting in your SIEM. And again, you run the risk, if you're not in your firewall console all the time, you run the risk of missing stuff. Sometimes you have instances where, hey, you have the data source set up in your SIEM, but something happens, the connection gets severed and logs stop flowing in. Again, if it's, for example, like your Entra logs, if that connection's severed, then you're potentially not getting, your Entra sign-in logs. And that could be a huge point of contention when it comes to, things like initial access. Very important to have that. And again, we'll touch on it later, but if you're not alerting on that, if you have workflows that are kind of, that are looking for suspicious Entra sign-ins, they're never going to fire if there's no detection from your Entra sign-ins because you're not getting the data. So yeah, definitely really important. Logs are very important.
I could imagine this is almost like a dashboard on your car too. I know I love the ATC, the air traffic controller analogy, but I imagine what if you had to check your oil or your gas? Like if you started driving your car and you didn't get that data in from your gas tank to say how much fuel you had, you would know if you're at risk of running out of fuel and being stuck on the highway.
Yeah, it's another really good one. And kind of moving into the next segment a little bit, you always talk about it as well when we're, chatting at work. there's a single log rarely tells the entire story. So having all of your logs in one central location really helps, especially when you're trying to investigate a potential incident. Like if you see, some random alert in one of your data sources, you don't want to have to scramble and log into all these different portals to try and piece together what is happening in 10 different portals. I mean, nobody wants to do that. You might have to if, that's your only option. But if you can centralize all those logs, that makes, investigating a lot simpler. So kind of going back to when I say a single log rarely tells the full story. For example, you could have a couple events come in, such as, a failed login. And then after that, you have another event, a successful login in a completely other state. You could have shortly after that a new high level or high privileged account created. After that, you could have PowerShell executing on someone's machine. So these events, they may not look malicious if they're, coming in one at a time and if they're appearing in all your different data sources. But if you're centralizing them and putting the pieces together, if the same user is logging in from New York and then they're logging in from California, and then you see them escalate privileges, that same account, and then your DLP product is showing them exfiltrating 100 files to whatever website, their personal email or Dropbox, that's a little more telling that, hey, there's something going on. There might be a threat actor trying to get in and exfiltrate data.
So it's almost like you have multiple pieces of paper on a loose leaf notebook and you got to kind of put them all in order, but the SIEM does that for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And tells the story. Yeah.
Yep.
And at the other end of the spectrum, you want to make sure you're getting all your logs, but then, does every IT admin or security and, analyst or engineer go out there and just turn on all the logs? Is there such a thing as too many logs?
Absolutely. And that's kind of one of the challenges that organizations could struggle with a product like this. Some organizations might think, let's just ingest everything that we have. Kind of behind the scenes of that is that ingesting a lot of logs, and depending on what product you have, but kind of contradicting myself here because I say, we got to get all of our logs in one place. But if you're ingesting, yes, if you're ingesting everything, it adds up in terms of the cost of your licensing. So I like to think about it, and I'll get into it a little bit later, but yes, you want to ingest all your data sources, but ingest the logs that are valuable to your security team. Ingest the logs.
Go back to licensing. What do you mean by it impacts your licensing or the cost of the company? How would it do that?
Yeah, so a lot of vendors will charge you, for example, ingesting X amount of X gigabytes of data per day. So it's really, if you're ingesting, depending on the company, the size of your company, if you're ingesting like 400 gigabits a day, it's going to be pretty expensive. Do you really need all 400 gigs of that data, or can you kind of trim it down and, ingest what is, again, actionable or valuable to your team? So
we're getting deep into the engineering weeds here, aren't we?
yeah, we're diving right in. And I guess what I mean by that? Okay, well, do you necessarily need, basically, I guess it depends if your server team wants to have it in there. Do you need all of these random, sys logs that are, monitoring the status of whatever? Maybe, but if it's not valuable to you, then, kind of just evaluate that. If it's not valuable, then maybe don't send it.
It's similar to notifications on your phone. If you turn on all the notifications from every app on your phone, what happens?
You get blown up. Everyone wants to
Yeah.
try and talk to you, and
Oh my goodness. And that may not cost you money, but remember there were days when, you had a cell plan and you had to pay by the text message and you had to think, do I really need text messages from this provider or this app or this service? And they would even warn you beforehand, going back to the old school days. They would say, this depends on your plan. This may impact your SMS usage for your plan. And that's kind of like a SIM is, yeah, the more logs you're ingesting, tens and thousands of lines of log code and JSONs into the SIM, that they're not going to do it for free.
no, that's a good analogy as well. It's like your phone plan. You can use X amount of data before, they start charging you for it.
Yeah. And they do love to charge.
Yes.
So why don't you touch a little bit on the magic behind the SIM, because it's really cool to think about the logs, the collectors, and all of that. But kind of the correlation about it. You touched a little bit on that. Just kind of nail that down a little bit more for us. How important is correlation?
Yeah, like I said, if you see, it's important to kind of use the SIM to piece together the different puzzles of what's happening. One event might not look overly concerning, but if you're seeing multiple events from or the same user, it could be something to potentially look into. There's a lot of stuff that some SIMs have, for example, like user behavior analytics type of deal. It basically tells you, how risky is this user based on the activity that the SIM has seen in all your different log data sources, and that kind of helps build a picture of is this user's been targeted from looking at like email logs. They've been frequently targeted by phishing, or looking at your Entra logs, so you can see, oh, this user's got 10 login attempts from Germany or Spain or wherever in the world. And the UEBA, user behavior analytics, can kind of, look at these different vectors and kind of correlate the activity into one, risk rating, kind of showing, hey, this user is maybe a little bit more targeted. And some SIMs as well will, take all of that, but they'll also factor in, if you have like threat research, if you have a threat research module and that's running alongside your SIM, it'll say, hey, is this IP that these failed logins are coming from, is that, related to a known threat actor group?
And it sounds like the better that data is presented to you, the more you're able to kind of assess and analyze the level of risk, the actual action that's happened. And you could probably tell in the SIM where the data is coming from, even maybe on something like a dashboard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it really helps, the investigative part of it. A lot of something that, a lot of like maybe the listeners that aren't in the field are listening to this and they're like, okay, how does this help, prevent attacks? The short answer is that a lot of the times it doesn't. It's more of a kind of detection, alerting, investigative tool. The SIM is not gonna magically block things. That's gonna be, okay, if something's happening on the endpoint, then your EDR is gonna block the PowerShell script that's running. Or if there's an unusual login, there's gonna be Entra conditional access policies that are blocking the login. Or if someone in your environment's trying to, again, upload your Mr. DLP, so I'm gonna use an example here. Someone's trying to upload 10 files to their personal Google Drive. Your DLP policies are going to block that. So it just wanted to hit that home. Now, like I said, we'll talk about it later. There's tools like SOAR that can run in tandem with your SIM, that if X detection happens, then Y workflow kicks in. And then that, does things such as maybe disabling an account or revoking a user session or resetting a password. So SIM is not going to be a preventative tool. It's going to be, like I said, detecting and alerting. And if an incident, God forbid, happens, depending on how long you're retaining these logs for, and that again is another hidden cost of the tool. You got to pay to ingest it, and then you got to pay to hold on to it for however long, and that kind of ties into the GRC compliance side of things. You can look back in 3, 6, 9, 12 months if you need to. You can query those logs, and more likely than not, if your SIEM is set up properly and you're pulling in what you need to, you'll be able to piece together, the attack that happened. Why did it happen? What could we do better? Things like that.
So let's move on to really what makes a good SIEM, because, the average home user out there, they might have McAfee or Norton tools, Norton utilities. They may have a free virus scanner and I'm protected. But in the enterprise environment, these are really, really important tools. They're intelligently giving risk scores and severity to certain activities, as like Phil is saying, and it helps the people on the other side of the screen to make intelligent decisions. But ultimately, how would you grade a SIEM of one versus another?
I think it really depends on what that tool can offer you. And we're talking about collecting the data, but once it's in there, what are you actually doing with that data? So as the SIEM SME of our team, I'm kind of, okay, yeah, I'm pulling in all this data, but then once we get the data in there, I need to, take that data for the team and make it readable. How do I do that? That kind of consists of building a data parser that kind of normalizes the data, breaks it up into, the data is being sent over in what's called a raw log. It's essentially an unparsed big block of text that nobody wants to try and read because you don't have time to do it, especially if, the alarms are going off and you're trying to investigate. Nobody wants to do that. When you're parsing the data, you're breaking it up into nice, think of it as fields and values. So X field, X value, Y field, Y value, making it nice and neat to read. And that helps with searching. It helps with building detection rules, or what I like to call correlation rules. It helps build dashboards as well. A lot of the dashboards in these SIEM tools are, at the end of the day, on the back end, they're just built from different queries. Again, helps with alerting, helps with investigation, and long-term retention. Like I was saying, being able to hold on to that, and again, you can have a bunch of raw log, big blocks of text from a year ago, but you need to be able to search on that data from a year ago. And if you're ingesting a raw log, you might have to. You can technically use regex to search for it, but nobody wants to do that. No,
Right.
As a SIEM SME, I want to make it, very easy for the team to come in and, search the data. This is the field that matters. If I find a query that I'm running, I'll save it in the search. I'll save it as a saved search, and I'll say, "Hey, team, just created this query that I found helpful. It's saved here. Run it."
Because they each run with their own language, or they have their own query language. For example, one SIEM might have a query language that's based on a certain type of formatting. It almost looks like computer programming when you get into it. If you don't do it just right, you have 0 results, and then you might have a false assumption. Oh, everything's good. There's no results. And so at what point, you've got all these logs and you really want to get the most value out of this. If you have 2 organizations, they buy the same SIEM and they ingest roughly the same logs, the same metadata, could one be dramatically more secure because of how the SME set it up?
I think it depends on, how you're setting it up. What are you doing with the logs? And it really, no 2 organizations are going to be the same. They're not going to have the same, SIEM tool. There's a million of them out there. Not everyone's going to have the same, other vendors. They're not going to have the same firewall tool. They're not going to have the same EDR tool. Really just depends on the logs that they have and what they do with the logs. And there's a bunch of tools out there. There's, for example, Splunk is a major one. Rapid7 is a quick set it and forget it for smaller organizations, whereas Splunk is more on the, it's a lot more granular, but it takes a lot more time to set up and configure properly. One that I used a lot when I was kind of doing some independent learning was Elastic. It's open source. You can go in and sign up for it for, I don't even know how long the free trial is, but you can go in, you can set up some rules, set up some collectors, and just start playing around and seeing, what a SIEM looks like. It doesn't, just because it's free doesn't mean it's a piece of crap. And there are SIEMs that actually, a lot of their foundation is built on Elastic.
Kind of like cars, a lot of them have the same manufacturer, the same engine block, but under the hood, but on the surface, they look a little bit different because of how they're designed in their UI.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We're kind of moving on. We're talking about all the good stuff that the SIEMs can do to you, or do for you, not do to you. Geez. But there's also, challenges, especially behind the scenes. One of those being alert fatigue. And that's really something that myself in my role, it's always top of mind for me. I don't want, the people on our team, coming in the morning to 50 different alerts. It's not really helpful for anybody. When some of the stuff, and kind of touched on it, I think last episode a little bit, but, alert on stuff that matters, alert on stuff that's anomalous. You don't want to have 100 alerts that are just false positives, that are IT doing their job or users logging in because they're going on vacation. And alert fatigue is just not great for anybody, and it leads to burnout. And then whenever a true positive comes in, you're going to miss it because you're just bulk closing all of these alerts because it's just too much. False positive, again, too much data as well is another big one from a licensing perspective. And I mean, there are other tools actually kind of that you can use. One that I like to use and I've been tinkering with is a tool called Cribble. And what that tool does is it essentially sits in between all your different log sources and your SIEM product. And so instead of, take the firewall logs for a good example. Firewall is an extremely large data source, could be triple digits in gigabits, depending on what you want and depending on what you need. A lot of organizations need the firewall traffic for compliance. They need it for investigations. So let's say if you can't get overly granular at the source, send all that to Cribble. And you can say, hey, Cribble, take your threat logs and take your traffic and send it to the SIEM, but take everything else and either just send it into the bleak existence of nothingness or just send it to an AWS S3 bucket or an Azure blob storage, something like that. What that does is it depends on how much data you have that you need to hold on to. That kind of balances out the cost of, a tool like Cribble. Is it going to be worth spending the money on that? Is it going to help save on your SIEM ingestion, or it's not going to be valuable? But it really depends on what, how many logs you have. But putting a tool like that in front of your SIEM can really help, again, ingest what you need, what is valuable to your team, and what is actionable. Another challenge, again, missing log sources. This is another big one. So, I think you touched on it. What happens if you're missing a log source? That's a missing piece to the puzzle. Say, another analogy, you're at home and, if your kid is in a bad mood and gets pissed and throws the puzzle across the room, you might find 9 out of the 10 pieces And
Mhm.
that one piece of the puzzle is just lost. I don't know where I'm going with this, but all I'm trying to say is missing log sources are very important, or not to have missing log sources are very important.
Yeah.
It helps build the full picture.
It's
And
almost like a SIEM is a perfect cookie. And if you go into the fridge in the pantry and you find you're missing sugar and flour, those are your crucial logs. You're not going
yes,
to have the perfect cookie because you're missing some of your key ingredients. Those log sources are your ingredients to help you enjoy doing your job, make it easy.
and there's always the handful that everybody likes to have. Your Entra sign-in
Mhm.
laws. I
Oh,
almost everybody I
100%.
have to assume is a Microsoft shop in this day and age. So having that is a huge one. Having, again, your firewall is a huge one. Your endpoint detection and response is a huge one. Um, a couple of other challenges I want to touch on. A lack of tuning. So again, that kind of ties into the alert fatigue. You can have all of these rules set up. Excuse me. You can have all these rules set up that are creating detections, but do they need to create 50 detections every time the rule runs? Probably not. That's probably a horrible rule that needs to be tuned. And then the last thing I wanted to mention
Mhm.
are, analysts themselves. They need to, if you're not in the platform every day, if you're not running queries every day, it could be a challenge. So that's kind of where I was coming from with, as an SME, kind of as I'm going through and investigating and building these queries, save them. So instead of, some analysts that aren't in there every day, they don't have to type out the entire however many lines of query every time they want to
Mhm.
run a search. You can go in, click the search, run. That's it. There's the information.
And that's one thing I really appreciate about you and the way you handle this tool is you're not the gatekeeper. There is a way to approach a tool and you can be the gatekeeper where nobody knows about this but me and they really need me around to run this, but you share your knowledge and you also try to reduce the friction for others who are behind you or working side by side with you because I'm not in there every day. The other analysts and the manager and different people on the team, they can log in there and the console updates, the UI updates. They have new features. The search area moved, and then this menu changed. How much do these tools change? And you provide those updates, and you even, when you get those emails, I'm pretty sure you get a few emails from the vendor about regular updates to the tool, updates to the sensors, the
Just a
rules.
few. Just a few.
Yeah. And then the latest threats. And I love that you screenshot those and share them with us. I mean, so we're in a real-time defense posture with our SIEM, and that it makes me really proud of our team, but also knows that it takes a lot of skill. This is not something like, oh, I graduated with my 4-year degree. I'm ready to run a SIEM and be on a security team. It's gonna take time to get on board and learn how all this works. There are classes that teach the concept of EDRs, XDR, and SOAR, but actually getting in there day to day, it's a different story.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I really like that our team does is I like listening to your guys' feedback. So if whoever's on alerts the 1 week is saying, hey, this rule is firing like crazy, I like hearing that because then I can, take a step back and evaluate the rule and say, hey, do we need this? If we need this, how do I make it quieter? Just kind of trying to make it easier for everybody else to try and avoid that alert fatigue. Some
Yeah,
SIMs, if we're pulling in a lot of different logs, it's great value and great visibility, but maybe we don't need to alert on everything.
right.
And maybe it warrants, if we need to alert on stuff, that again, partnering with SOAR, maybe we can, if it's a lower level alert, hey, we have the log and the alert that the activity occurred, let's auto close it.
And that's a good point is with alert fatigue and setting up all these detections, does tuning ever really end? Or do you say,
No,
"I'm
it's
done"?
a full-time job, I can tell you.
In
It's
6 months, you're still gonna be tuning, and in 6 years, you'll still be tuning.
it's that. There's so many, I mean, for an organization, I can't imagine what a SIM in a Fortune 500 company looks like. I mean, there's probably, teams of 10 to 15 people that are just their entire job is to sit there and evaluate, how these rules are working. But also, if there's another part of tuning, it's not just the alert fatigue. And like you're saying, if there's some new release notes that come out, if I'll back up a little bit. If you have, depending on your SIM product, you might have, parsers that the vendor builds. And if those parsers get updated by the vendor, then what you got to do is you got to first look at all the logs that are coming in, seeing how those are displayed differently. If they're displayed differently, what do I mean by that? I mean, are these fields changed? Have the fields been renamed to something else? If they have, and you have rules going off of a data source that has a parser updated, and I know I'm getting deep in the weeds here, but we're going to have a couple episodes that we get deep in the weeds because you and I both know we love talking about it. We can go on for hours and hours and hours about it. But yeah, if your parser updates, then you got to look at all your rules that are, targeting that data source, make sure they're still running correctly. The worst thing to happen is, you have a parser update that you don't know. A security alert happens and, somebody comes to you and say, hey, I thought we had a rule for this. And you go and look at it. Oh, we do. But wait a minute. This was looking at, when the parser was on version 2.0 and now we're on 5.0 and the fields are completely different in your logs and the rule doesn't work. So yeah, it's very important to tune to kind of block out some of the alert fatigue, but also make sure that once your parsers update and once your data sources update, make sure the rules still run properly and make sure they're still, able to trigger detections. And obviously you're not going to be able to test everything. Like you're not going to be able to simulate like an account takeover, for example. But if you could try your best to just read the logs, seeing what is coming in for maybe other events from the same data sources. I know I'm rambling on about this, but it's important. I do it all the time.
And honestly, what would we do if, you went on vacation for a month and came back from Barbados?
I wish.
The SIM updated. Oh, yeah, that would be awesome for you. And meanwhile, we're just keeping everything running. Meanwhile, the vendor updated A, B, and C. And then you walk back in and you open it up and it's almost like everything's broken. Not everything. That's overstating it. But
I hope not.
Yeah.
Walk back in and the building's on fire.
Yeah. But there are times when the SIM is the output. It's the aggregator, it's the curator of all this data, and it puts it out, like you're saying, a single pane of glass. But there are multiple components. You've got the sensor on every computer. You've got connectors. You've got integrations with multiple tools. And some SIMs are better than others because they may have connectors and integrators with a full suite of all the tools that most major companies use. Then you look at another one and it's missing 5 of the big ones. It's like, well, I'd love to use your tool, but you don't integrate with anything that we need.
And I think that's one of the big things as well that organizations should evaluate when they're POCing a SIM, for example. Yes, there's generic connections, but a lot of the times it can be kind of a pain to make those generic connections work. So I personally think it's really important when an organization is evaluating a SIM to potentially, use in their environment. Look at what it integrates with. Like you're saying, it's a good point. What type of out of the box connections does it have?
Yeah. And so, there's a lot to it as far as ingesting the logs, considering the cost of the company, licensing costs, and all of those things. At the end, how do you make sure you really have an effective program? In my opinion, it would be, can somebody who's not in it every day sit down, open up the console, and understand what they're looking at?
Yeah, and that's kind of, again, what I try and do for the team is, follow a set of best practices. Like I said, collect those meaningful logs, collect the stuff that is actionable and alert on the actionable stuff. If you have to collect everything, for example, all your firewall logs, that's for compliance, okay, but don't alert on every, failed login attempt or,
Yeah.
make sure you're alerting on valuable stuff. Remove the noisy alerts. Testing the
Mm-hmm.
detections, like I was saying before, it's another huge one. So before you see, this templated rule that the vendor has built out for you, test it. Run the search query in your logs and see if you're even ingesting those logs or if you don't even use the product. And you could say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we have a rule for this. No, you don't, because we're not even ingesting the logs and the organization's not even using the product.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
integrate.
can we touch? Oh, yeah, to integrate too. Sorry, go ahead.
Integrate with other modules that your vendor has. The threat intelligence data. If you have like a user account monitoring tool, integrate with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off here.
No, I was interjecting. And what I'm thinking of is you mentioned firewall, all of the ingestion of logs, but some of these might be coming from the computer because of user activity or malicious actor activity. Could be an email was clicked. There are detections for that. This could cover an array of activities. It's not necessarily just a programmatic action was taken, such as bot was doing this or that, or, the firewall noticed this automated activity that's hitting DNS. So it could be end user activity. It could be a multitude of data sources or an event sources, I guess you would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads into maybe a misconception with the SIM is that like we were saying, more logs are always better. Not necessarily. Like I said again, another one, a SIM prevents, threat actors from trying to, enter your environment. No, it doesn't. It alerts on the activity. So then, you can mobilize, whether it's manual remediation or automated remediation. And then the other big one is, and I could, go on a TED talk about this one, but I'm not going to. I already feel like I'm getting heated enough here, but a lot of the times a SIM is not. You can't just buy a SIM and say, okay, we're good to go. You've got to.
Yeah.
A lot of the times, especially some of the more complex ones, requires a lot of setup. And then once you have it set up, 3 months down the line, there's updates and it requires tuning. Like I said, you could think of it as almost like it's a full-time gig, man. And sometimes it is for the larger Fortune 500 companies. Like I'm saying, I'm sure there's companies out there, your Apple and your Amazon that have teams of people that all they're doing. And I'm not saying all they do is to, diminish what they're doing, but that's their wheelhouse. They just,
Yeah.
they reviewing all of your rules and, just making sure they're constantly working and making sure that, they're configured properly. And there are some smaller products that, you can, set up and say, hey, let's get everything connected and we're good to go. But a
Set it
lot of
and
the
forget
times
it.
it's not that easy. And the last thing I'll mention about that is just the whole thing about, AI is stealing jobs and, AI is going to be able to, you're going to be able to deploy an agent to triage every single alert for you. And it's just not the case. You can't, yes, you can have it, you can have an agent deployed in your environment for however long and it can learn it, but I personally don't think that, an AI agent is going to know, quote unquote, know your organization's environment better than you.
I have a lot to say about this, but yeah, go ahead.
No, go. That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to end that segment on. So if you have,
Yeah, just don't. I feel like Charlie Brown. I'm ready to run up and hit that football because the thing is, AI is a buzzword, and there are purists out there and people who want nothing to do with technology. They are Luddites. They might have a very anti-technology lifestyle, but in the corporate sector, we have no choice but to keep up with AI and the threats of AI, AI accelerated attacks, AI facilitated threats that are evolving at an endless basis. Is AI going to take away cybersecurity jobs? There are places where AI, an agent, could automate analysis for certain things. But like Phil was saying, how is it going to know the context for every user, every department, every rule for, every service, every bot that's running in a medium to large organization, let alone a Fortune 500 company, a very complex technical environment? And just to let an AI security bot run wild and set up its own remediations and automated workflows, a SOAR playbook, that if this happens, do this. And all of a sudden, the whole thing comes crashing down because there's not a human in the loop that's saying, hold on a second, that is actually not the case for this scenario. In this situation, I know this and this to be true, but because you're an AI agent or you're a bot, you wouldn't know that. But I've been doing this for X number of years or decades. And that brings a context and a color to the analysis that you can't, you can train bots on volumes upon volumes of release notes and logs and how things are done and playbooks. But at the end of the day, you have to have a human in the loop that's actually making that final analysis and say, take this step, run this automation. That's just my 2 cents.
And I think that's the key point of it. I'm not trying to be the old grumpy guy that's like, AI sucks and it's never going to be useful and we need to stop using AI. No, I think it's very helpful. I think it's investigations. It's very helpful. Gives you a starting point. Hey, this happened, that happened. It gives the human, the ability to then say, or the information needed to make that decision. I don't think we're at the point in time, personally, to where we should just have a bunch of AI agents, running a SOC. I think we still need those human analysts in there to make those big decisions, because the last thing you want to do is deploy an AI agent and then you're locking out service accounts for crucial business processes left and right and
isolating servers.
Yeah. I'm going down a rabbit hole. I feel very
It's
strongly
true though,
about
but to your point, AI is not going to eliminate the need for an analyst.
No.
Yeah. And I've seen vendors have attempts not just with SIEMs but with multiple tools that our company uses in different calls, where a vendor will say, we are AI powered, we have AI security, we have AI this, and then we actually get the query and it says, oh, my name is Mary, I'm your AI agent to give you all the answers, and you type it in and it's like unable to parse it out, or it gives you some weird response. And they spent how many millions of dollars developing these AI enablements for their tool, and it's like we hardly even use it. It's just kind of worthless and sits there.
Yeah. I like to use it as kind of an assistant. I think you could kind of attest to it too. And some
100%.
of the agents, whether it's Copilot or whatever, I think it gets you, started. It gets you on the right track for what you're trying to do, but it's not going to give you, the exact output, or it's not going to give you the exact search you need to run.
Right. And so there's first party tools like the AI that's built into the tool, like a SIEM or a DLP console or a cloud console, like, My brain is Defender, Microsoft's tool, and they have embedded Copilot. Then there's the third-party tools. You might have an internal AI agent, or you might have a well-secured, version of Copilot in your enterprise that doesn't crawl across everyone's SharePoint and expose sensitive human resources documents to everybody. And then you're able to, provide some confidence and say, hey, in this scenario, what would be the best alternative or option that I would look for? And it'll give you a decent analysis. Again, like you're saying, with a grain of salt, because it can hallucinate, especially the more the conversation goes on. AI can go off in left field, kind of like I'm doing right now. I might be
Wow. And I'm going to go off in left field and to end on it and say, now I feel like we're in, the Terminator movies, because now we have AI agents hacking into other companies, and we're not a news channel, but I'm sure if you look up, rogue AI or AI hack, somewhere in the
face.
Yes, you're gonna see these AI agents, hacking into other companies, and so I think we're not there yet, but we're getting there.
And it's almost like a flex, because one will come out and they have a hack that, it accidentally crawled across the server through an unmonitored web access. Yeah, they knew that it had web access. And all of a sudden you find out that the company that they hacked into, they left a back door open that let that agent in. And so now you're starting to think, like, as you read some of these technical details about what's actually happening about these press releases, it's like, one company's competing against another company. It's like, I can do this too. And it almost becomes like a flex that they're trying to prove their relevance in the industry. And at the end of the day, it's always good to have a level of distrust about AI and technology at some level, and say, I've got my limits about what I would disclose to AI, or what I would trust AI to do for me or for my company.
Sure, for sure. I'll get off my soapbox about this now, and
we have taken a left turn. But let's get back to, sometimes you gotta start setting up a tool, and you do all the tuning, or you come into an organization and they'll say, hey, we're looking at a new vendor and we're looking at a new SIEM. What does that process actually look like? When you replace one, what tells you that, all right, this SIEM is not just different, but it's actually better, and it's going to help make the organization more secure?
Yeah, so I think I could talk quite a bit about this because I did it.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, when I was interviewing with where we're working now, there was a part of the interview was the manager that was interviewing was saying, hey, we think you'd be a really good fit to kind of own the SIEM platform. And back then we were using a different SIEM that we're using now. And as I started diving into that tool, and as we were kind of working through that tool, and not just myself, but a couple of other, obviously I had my input because I was kind of the SIEM guy. I was brought on to be the SIEM guy. Again, to simplify it. But oh God. We were kind of. I want to say, and let me know if you agree with that. I think we were, as a security team, we were almost kind of going beyond what our old SIEM was offering in terms of capabilities. Yeah. We were kind of almost growing out of it. Yeah. So, we started relaying this back to management, and we were starting to taking a look at other vendors and running other POCs. And for some context, I was probably there. What would you say, about 6 months or 8 months? This is my very first security job, and I'm in the process of swapping out what I think is a core security tool for teams. And if it's your entire alerting
security tool. Yeah.
So I basically They told me you're going to be leading this, POC search. And when we inevitably found the vendor we were going with, you're going to be heading up the migration of that.
Yeah.
So when we were going into POC testing, oddly enough, I think we had calls with a couple vendors, but at the end of the day, we really only committed to POCing one tool because during, not the slide deck, but the demo sessions, we thought, hey, this could be a good fit. So let's try it. So there were a bunch of different, things that I was looking for when POCing personally. Again, the integrations. What does this tool integrate with? And that was actually a little bit of a challenge because ironically, this was a very new product. When we inevitably signed on with the product, it was 6 months in development at that point.
Right. It was new to them and new to us.
Yeah. So, but what they had those key integrations for us. I don't want to kind of, name every single vendor that we use, but the few integrations or the few vendors that we had, they had integrations for. Yeah. So it was a plus for us at the time. Another thing that was a key piece for us was reporting. Being able to quickly generate reports to provide to external auditors that come in. This tool did a lot better than what we were using. So it was another big thing for us. So again, POC goes by, and I'm trying not to ramble on for too long. I feel like I've been talking for a while. But
this is good.
POC goes by, we end up signing the contract with them, and then it's more or less all hands on deck. And again, I was in the role for 6 months at this point. I knew what a SIEM was. I didn't know the inner workings of a SIEM. So I basically went home and, read everything I could about a SIEM. Yep. Exactly. Watched all these YouTube videos about it.
Everything.
Not the tool specifically itself, but just learning more about, SIEM best practices and concepts. Mentioned it.
Yeah.
I set up a SIEM in my home lab just to kind of get the concept. This is what a detection rule is. This is what a data source is. This is what a collector is, and
at a fundamental level. Yeah. And then the nuances of what makes one better than the other.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So once we signed on, it was pretty much go time for me in terms of, migrating everything that we had into the old SIEM over to the new SIEM. So my strategy for it, and I'm not saying this is, the best strategy or the only strategy, but I went about it was getting those key data sources hooked up before anything. Entra, again, that's a huge one. We need Entra sign-in logs.
100%.
So getting that hooked up and then looking at our old SIEM, say, hey, what are we ingesting here? That's like the highest priority. Getting those onboarded as well. And then also in tandem, getting some correlation rules and alerting rules set up to be able to start creating those alerts. So we kind of had two SIEMs running at the same time for a minute. I'm sure the firewalls did not like that with logs.
But honestly, you can't just turn one off and turn the other one on, and you hope everything just works.
You can't. Yeah, you can't just sever the connection, and you gotta get onboarded into your new SIEM. And yeah, I mean, we had pro service hours as well that we were using, so it was good to be able to kind of leverage them for some things. And I guess to kind of precursor this, when I came on, the old SIEM was already set up. I didn't have to do any of that. I would go in and I would tune a rule here or run a query there, but I wasn't building it from the ground up like I was for, this migration. And I might sound like I'm complaining, but I'm not. I love doing it. I love doing this stuff. And it was really, it was a great learning experience. And I'm glad that I was able to kind of head up that project of, taking this one tool, replacing it, and kind of building the SIEM up to what it is today. I mean, obviously, again, it's not, I wouldn't say it's perfect today. There's a bunch of stuff that could still be tuned, but from where we were and, where we are now, getting the log collectors out there and getting the data sources onboarded. It was a really cool learning experience. Just to kind of close with that.
Yeah. And this is also part of the information security career development path, because when you graduate school or when you take some courses and you're in IT and you want to get into information security, you have to take ownership of something at some point. And you're going to be challenged or find yourself in a situation where the company says, can you take this on? And, were you equipped day one? You had your education behind you, but at the end of the day, it was you saying, yes, I'm going to learn everything there is about a SIEM. I'm going to learn how the current SIEM works and where we can go with the new one and fill in those gaps. And at the end of the day, to your credit, and I'll toot your horn, is, you really made it your baby, but it runs like a well-oiled machine. The detections and the policies that are in place and the automated actions, some of the workflows, the off hours investigations are so much easier, and there's no stone left unturned that I don't look down through and Phil has exposed that telemetry, Phil has parsed that data, or made it very easy to see the data source, and I can go look at the the event logs, or I can look at the original console and parse it out myself and correlate and say, oh, no, Phil had it right actually in the detection to begin with. I was just providing my own peace of mind, my own sanity check. But at the end of the day, I still went back to the SIEM, entered a note. This is my finding based upon this. At this time, there's no further concerns, or it needs to be escalated and take the next actions. That's all to your credit.
Thank you. Appreciate it. At least I'm glad that it's easy to use.
Yeah. Well, with anything, even as an analyst coming out, and I sit with you on a lot of these calls for this tool because I am in a role of trying to provide support when you're not available. But it's like any of these very high performance specialized tools, like a European sports car. You may have taken a course in auto mechanics in high school, but then there's people who can tune a port, and there's a big difference. And, we are working with some of the best in class tools, and it's an incredibly, opportunity. It's an incredible position to be in, to work with some of the best in class tools in our industry. So, and I think we take full advantage of them to provide the company value for their dollar, but also to make sure that nothing gets by that either wasn't detected, prevented, or provided visibility to the team.
That's a good point too. I like that. What you said there. It's trying to provide value for not only us as analysts to be able to, investigate these alerts in a timely manner and as easy as possible, but also at the end of the day, the company, the organization is spending however much on these tools that are usually very expensive. So it's always
very expensive.
If we can get the most that we possibly can out of these tools in terms of value, that's the goal. Again, and I'm not saying, hey, let's turn on all 800 templated rules because they're there. That's great, but it's not. Yeah, that's great, but it's not providing value to us.
Right. And that is, one aspect is the audit checkbox. Are we just checking a box and say, yes, company, we spend this X amount of money every year to renew our license, and now audit can say, do you have this tool? Yes. All right, let me see some of the logs. Let me see some of the events. Let me see some of the false positives, the true positives. Let me see the notes for what was done during the investigation. Audit is very thorough when they analyze these tools. And firsthand, that's one of the benefits of the tool we use is the the reportability of it, or, the generation of
Getting the data out in a nice, clean manner and getting it into the auditor's hands in a timely manner as well. I think it's very important.
Well, where do you want to go from here? We kind of went full circle.
Yeah, we're kind of coming to the end of it. Kind of looking ahead, there's one main point. I mean, we have a couple points that I think we want to touch on, but one that I kind of want to touch on, we mentioned it earlier, but that is kind of, taking the next step in your SIEM program from just using SIEM to kind of pairing it with SOAR. SOAR being security orchestration and response. What do I mean by that? Like I said, it's basically, a workflow playbook built on automation. It's not necessarily AI. You could have AI do something as a step in the workflow, but it's essentially, think of it as, hey, if A happens, then do B type of deal. A few examples of this, and one of the things that I'm trying to do and working with another analyst on our team is trying to make our SIEM and our SOAR products run in tandem with each other to either, decrease the time that it takes to investigate an alert or decrease our response time. So we're not waiting on, certain teams to do certain things. A few examples are, hey, if this detection triggers for a login from wherever, an anomalous location, let's go ahead and revoke the user sessions. And what that means is just sign them out of their Microsoft Office session on their phone, on their web portal, their computer, make them interactively sign in again.
Right.
If you see in a user account if there's an alert for maybe like a privilege escalation or a script running, have a workflow that automatically takes action and disables the user account. If there's a malicious email that got delivered to a user account, initiate an automatic, what I call a clawback of that email. So where your email security tool or your SOAR will make like an API request to your email security tool to pull that out of that user's inbox to prevent them from clicking on it.
Come a long ways from the manual days of logging in and,
just manually deleting it out.
Yeah.
And it's
very trying to go in. Yeah.
The last thing I'll say about the whole SOAR thing is it helps decrease the response time, but this goes back to what you and I were talking about on our last call about finding the balance between your security posture and the operational aspects of the organization. And it also, if you're, for example, triggering a workflow off of a specific unusual login alert, you got to make sure the rule is tuned so that you're not revoking sessions left and right and disabling all these service accounts, and then you're crippling the operational ability of the organization. If you're locking out like a service account or a bot account that's, doing these automated processes, if you lock that out, you're breaking some part of the organization, and it's not going to end well.
That's not good. You're not going to be very popular with some of the teams in the company.
No. Well, yeah, we're kind of coming to the end of the episode. Did you want to cover anything else before we wrap up here?
I think we've covered it from top to bottom and at a very high level. There's so much more involved with this product. It is, like a fine-tuned machine. It is like a sports car, an F1 racer, and it takes a lot of expertise. It takes time. It takes experience. And that's something we both endeavored to do with the tools that we're responsible for. And it's going to continue. AI can assist and help us to develop our skills or provide better visibility for alerts and logs and processing those, building better rules. But at the end of the day, it takes individuals like ourselves and others all across the industry and those who want to get into the industry to, get out their pencil and figure things out and draw it out and figure out this is how it works and how can I make it better. So, but at the end of the day, I'll finish with a question of the day. How about that?
I like that. I like the question
Okay.
of the day.
So the question of the day is really simple. And why do I do this? I really hope that this channel engages and resonates with an audience, not just those who are in the field, but also those who have nothing to do with security. We're going to start incorporating definitions on the screens, and you probably have seen those, but also want to talk to those who are in the industry. If you could improve one thing about security operations right now, would you choose better visibility, better detections, or a faster response? Which one do you think is the most important? I've got my answer, and we'll talk a little bit more about this next week. But I think the biggest takeaway from this conversation is a SIEM can give you tremendous visibility. Visibility by itself, like Phil says, it's not security. You need meaningful telemetry, useful detections and correlations, and then at the end of the keyboard and the mouse, analysts who actually understand what they're looking at and the process for understanding how to respond to something. So the technology matters, but the people, tuning, processes, and decisions are around it are what make it the most effective.
Yeah, I hope
good discussion.
Yes, I hope it was valuable to the listeners. And if I went a couple rabbit holes or got on my soapbox a little bit, I apologize. But
more dad jokes.
Yes, we need more of those. The topic of SIEM is very near and dear to my heart, I will say.
Absolutely. It's fun. At the end of the day, you get really, it's like a puzzle, it's you're really trying to piece things together and figure out why it's not working. And when it does, that's a tremendous sense of gratification and accomplishment. So, all right. I'm Chris. That's Phil. This is the Security Sandbox. We'll see you on the next one.
See ya.